Hey folks, welcome to another WaterTrek 360. A couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of traveling to Peru, and one of the places I stopped was Lake Titicaca, which happens to be the highest deep water lake in the world at roughly 12,510 feet. I had an opportunity to test out the Divevolk Seatouch 4 Max underwater housing and my iPhone 13 Pro. Now, full disclosure, I did not dive there, it's high elevation diving, but I did use a couple of selfie poles. It gave me an opportunity to get the housing and the camera down to about 15, 16 feet in and around the floating islands of Uros. So, let's see how they did.
Lake Titicaca is a large, deep, freshwater lake on the border of Bolivia and Peru. It's called the highest navigable lake in the world by volume of water and surface area. It has a surface elevation of 12,507 feet, a maximum depth of 932 feet, average depth around 350 feet. The depth of the water where I videoed was about 60 feet. This video was filmed in the Titicaca Bay in an area called Uros. These are floating islands built by the Uru people to protect themselves in the past from competing tribes and the conquistadors. I knew there were these reed boats that they used to get to the islands, but that's where some of my problems first started. I thought these were strictly paddle. They're not. You can see that they used a power boat to push these along. Unfortunately, the speed created so much drag on the housing, I was afraid it would snap off from the selfie poles. This little clip was at an outer island away from Uros. My dream vision was to get some clear water shots of fish life and maybe, just maybe, the large, endangered, and elusive Lake Titicaca water frog. It is entirely aquatic and only found in the Lake Titicaca basin. That was not meant to be. So disappointment number one was how murky and opaque the water actually was. I'm not sure why I kept thinking there would be crystal clear, pristine waters, but I have seen some photos and video of other areas of Lake Titicaca where certainly the water clarity was better. Unfortunately, the reed boats as well as the reed islands themselves, I managed to pick up some kind of film on my fingers that got onto the lens. Once on our first floating island, I kind of recognized why the water clarity was so bad. First, the boat traffic was way heavier than I anticipated. Secondly, there are really no bathroom facilities, so the islanders either paddle or take their power boat out into the reeds, and that's where effectively all toilet functions are taking place. Additionally, the Uros Islands are in Titicaca Bay, the closed end, right near Puno, which is a really large town, and the runoff from the town and the lack of a lot of water movement adds to the lack of clarity. And lastly, the reed islands themselves are in a constant state of decomposition. Each island will last 10 to 15 years, and a new layer of reed bed is constantly put on them. So with movement and traffic and the people living on them, the particulate matter falling down from the island itself is pretty heavy. For those of you who have seen my other videos on the iPhone 13, you'll know that my only knock really on the iPhone is that sometimes it has a hard time underwater focusing. If there's a lot of particulate matter, if you move from a close subject to a faraway subject, it tends to sometimes to get confused. A lot of the footage I had here, because of the water quality, was not usable. As for the Divevolk, in my other videos I've mentioned one of my peeves, which is with the lens kit. In order to use the red filter and the wide angle must be screwed into the red filter. Normally underwater you have an opportunity to get any bubbles out, etc. With the selfie stick setup that I had, and using them upside down, that wasn't going to happen. Once I saw how poor the video was and the unwanted trapped air, I ended up moving both to the side, wide angle and red filter. I was really paranoid about losing either or both at the Reed Islands. After making changes, the videos did get a little better. The big challenge here was that after a lot of time, effort to get to the floating islands of Uros, and I can say that I got video of what is actually underneath those islands, the results of what I took were disappointing from a videographer's standpoint. So ultimately, I got some reed stalactites hanging down from a floating island in cloudy water at one of the highest lakes in the world. Not my best, but it was worth a shot. My biggest concern of the high altitude test is with the Divevolk membrane itself. I've mentioned previously where I found a bubble within that membrane. I've talked to the company. They said, hey, it's really not an issue. However, at 12,570 feet, that bubble was enormous. Now, I know you're saying it's not supposed to impact performance. Well, I can't really tell if it did or not per se, but I have to imagine a bubble where I need to use it if I was actually underwater might be a challenge. My other big concern is the shelf life of the product itself. With 100,000 touches in a clear membrane, that's great. When you have a giant bubble floating around like this, what does it do to it? It's been a little over a month since using it in Puno in Lake Titicaca. Full disclosure, the size of the bubble has shrunk, but it hasn't gone away. It's roughly 10 millimeters or a third of an inch in diameter, and the concern is still there.
So while this was not truly an epic failure, if you are going to go to Lake Titicaca and try to get some underwater footage, remember some of my challenges. I was on a tour, so I had limited time. I do want to thank the native islanders of Uros for allowing me access to parts of the island normally off limits to tourists. Now, that said, I'm not trying to bash Divevolk. It is so far my favorite underwater housing for the iPhone 13, and the only thing keeping me from giving it an A rating is the membrane. If you have a Seatouch 4 or 3 and have had an issue with the membrane, especially around bubbles, let me know. I'd like to hear from you. If you are going to go diving in Lake Titicaca, I was unable to find any charters or dive shops in Puno or La Paz. I think your best bet would be to get gear down on the coast. If you leave from Io, it's about an 8-hour drive to Puno. From Paracas, it's 18 hours, and from Lima, it's a 2-day drive. If you are thinking about diving in Lake Titicaca, get yourself some high altitude dive training. The tables are completely different. There are no recompression chambers up there. If you have an issue, you have a problem. There are places in the U.S. that teach high altitude diving. Get that training. Check out some of our other videos. I've got a few more coming on underwater housing, as well as some of our other videos. I'm going to leave you with a clip from Uros. And as always, until the next time, go explore, get wet.
That's good.